بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. So alhamdulillah, thumma alhamdulillah, it's a great honor to be back here in this beautiful masjid with this beautiful community again for a short lecture inshallah. I've realized that in Ramadan people are tired, so the 45-minute lectures are no good. So inshallah, just some reflections that I'll share with you in respect to the Qur'an. So I believe the title of the talk is the Qur'an Transforming Lives. And the truth is, when you think about the Qur'an in this month, as we mentioned I think last week in the khutbah, or the week before, that the month of Ramadan, as we all know, is the month of the Qur'an. Yes, everything associated with this month goes back to the Qur'an. The fadl and the virtue of Ramadan is because it is the month in which the Qur'an was revealed. شهر رمضان الذي أنزل فيه القرآن. The first thing Allah mentions about the month of Ramadan is that it's the month in which the Qur'an was revealed. إنا أنزلناه في ليلة القدر. Indeed, we revealed it, i.e. the Qur'an, on the night of power. The night of power has been given virtue because it was the night in which the Qur'an was revealed. The month of Ramadan has been given virtue because it's the month in which the Qur'an was revealed. Jibreel alayhi salam is the best of angels because the Qur'an was revealed upon Jibreel alayhi salam. So everything associated with the month of Ramadan, it goes back to the Qur'an. And the fadl of the Qur'an, as we always remind ourselves, is that the Qur'an, of course, ultimately is the book of guidance. It is what can transform lives. If we approach the Qur'an with the intention to gain guidance from it, to understand it, to reflect upon it, to take benefit from it, and have that attitude with the Qur'an, rather than let's just recite as much as we can, which is also important. And especially in Ramadan, some of the scholars, they mentioned that they had a discussion about what should the focus be on Ramadan. Should it be to understand and take your time and reflect, or should it be to read as much as possible because of all of the rewards in terms of qira'ah and tilawa? من قرأ حرفا من كتاب الله فله حسنة والحسنة بعشر أمثالها. The Prophet ﷺ said that whoever recites one letter from the book of Allah will get 10 hasanat. Will get a hasana which is like tenfold. We know اقرأ القرآن فإنه يأتي يوم القيامة شفيعا لأصحابه, that read the Qur'an, recite the Qur'an. Why? Because it will come on the day of judgment as an intercessor for the one who used to recite it, for his companion. And subhanAllah, when you think about the wording used, the companion, you know, if you have a companion, you're always in contact with that person. Yes, you're checking up on each other, you're going out together, you're spending time together. That's your companion. So here the Prophet ﷺ is saying that that's the relationship you need to have with the Qur'an. If you want the Qur'an to be your intercessor on the day of judgment, and when you think about that phrase, intercessor on the day of judgment, يَوْمَ يَفِرُّ الْمَرْءُ مِنْ أَخِيهِ, that day when everybody will be concerned with their own state. Nobody will care about their spouse, their mother, their father, their children on that day. On that day, everyone's worried about themselves. But the Qur'an will come and intercede for the one who took it as a companion in this dunya. That means having that constant relationship of reading the Qur'an, reflecting on the Qur'an, doing tilawah of the Qur'an, reciting the Qur'an. Especially, as I said, in this month of Ramadan. Some of the scholars would say that how can you get through the month without doing a khatam of the Qur'an? And without finishing the Qur'an at least once in this month, in terms of recitation. And those who are huffaz and those who are fluent in reciting even more than that. Yes, doing 1 or 2 juz a day in this month. If we're not going to do it now, when are we going to do it? Yes. So this is with regards to the recitation. But the theme of transforming lives, how is it that this Qur'an can transform your life? How can it transform my life? There's no doubt that the way that the Qur'an will transform our lives is when we understand this Qur'an and we reflect on the message of the Qur'an and we do tadabbur of the Qur'an. This is how the Qur'an will change lives. And I gave the example in the khutbah of Alfie Best. For those of you who weren't here, there's an individual by the name of Alfie Best. He's in a podcast. He's asked, and he's a multi-millionaire. His father's a multi-millionaire. Everything going for him, young, in his mid-20s. When you think about what it is that our young people are striving for in life, it's a life of luxury. They want the money, they want the cars, they want the fame, they want all of these things. And that Alfie Best has it all. He's got all of that. But he accepts Islam. So the person asks him, why did you accept Islam? What brought you to Islam? And he explains, and as I said, I mentioned it in the khutbah, that I had a friend, a Muslim friend, who said to me that, you've taken X, Y, and Z out on the dad's helicopter, but you've not taken me. Okay, can we go out one day on the helicopter? And his dad has an Aston Martin helicopter. So they agreed a day, and they went out on the helicopter, and his Muslim friend said, I need to get back early because my mum's taking her shahada. So he said, okay. And he said, inquired, shahada, what's this? He said, we're going to the mosque, she's going to become Muslim. So Alfie Best said, I've got nothing to do tonight, can I come as well? So he said, yeah, you can come. So he goes, in the evening we went to the masjid. And he said, as soon as I entered the masjid, I felt something that I'd never felt before in my life. Yes, it was a feeling that overcame me, that I've never felt before in my life. He said after the mother had taken, his friend's mother took the shahada, he said, I asked the Imam, is there anything you can give me to read about this religion? He said he gave me a translation of the Qur'an. Alfie Best says, I went home and within 6 weeks I read it from cover to cover twice. In 6 weeks, I read the translation of the Qur'an cover to cover. He said, then I went back and I took my shahada. And that was the impact of understanding. He said, this is from Allah. This is from the creator of the heavens and the earth. That's somebody and he read the Qur'an cover to cover twice in 6 weeks. I ask myself and yourselves, how many times have we read it cover to cover? Maybe 30, 40, 50 years old. And to understand the message of the Qur'an. And that's the impact. When he read that, he realized that this is a message from Rabbul Alameen. And that transformed his life. I'll give you another example. This is an example of my own father. So when I was growing up, we used to live in Dundee, in Scotland. And at that time, it was the early 90s, my father wasn't practicing at all. Yeah, so when I was growing up, I can't remember ever going to the masjid. Okay, not even for Jum'ah. Maybe on Eid, we would go to the masjid just to pray Eid Salah. And my father, he had an off license. Yes, so he would sell alcohol, and it was a grocery store. And in those days, there was no Tesco, Asda, none of these things. And like I said, he wasn't practicing Islam. But he had, money, business was going very well. And one day, somebody came into his shop, and he said to him that, give me £10. This is early 90s, yes, or mid 90s. And I'll give you what's in this box. He had a shoe box. So my father thought £10 is a lot of money. In those days, £10 is not like £10 today. So I said, okay, I gave him, took £10 out of the till and I gave it to him. He said, then I opened the box and there was a translation of the Qur'an in the box. So he said, I thought, what's this guy doing? £10 and he's giving me this. What am I going to do with this? And this was his attitude at that time. So he said, I took the Qur'an and I went in the storeroom in the back and I put it on the shelf. He said 6 months later, what happens is my father's partner, who was his brother-in-law, he sold alcohol to somebody underage. Yes, he sold alcohol to somebody underage. And he very quickly, the council found out, and within a month or two, the license was taken away. And that was a big source of income. Big source of income was from alcohol sales. May Allah forgive him and us all. And he said that within 2 months, the license had been taken away. And like I said, that was a big source of income. And then at the same time, a Tesco had just opened up around the corner, the first ever Tesco in Dundee. So within 6 months, he lost everything, went completely bankrupt. Of course, there's no barakah. You live a life like that with alcohol and these things. There's no barakah at all in your life. Always stress, always this, that. And within 6 months, everything had gone. So the time came to empty the shop. And as he's emptying the shop, he comes across that same box. So he said, I've got nothing now, nothing to do, I might as well start reading this Qur'an. So he took the Qur'an home and he started to read the Qur'an. This was a translation of the Qur'an. And he was reading it, finished it, yes, within a week, read it again, kept reading it. And he attached himself, and that changed his life completely. From that point forward, when he connected with the Qur'an and realized what life was about, because the Qur'an is it's the message of how to live your life. and realized all of the wrong that he was doing and did tawbah and istighfar, changed the life completely. Completely, to the extent reading the Qur'an every single day, 5 times salah, going to the masjid. All of this changed. How did this transformation come? Through the Qur'an. Through the Qur'an. That's the impact that the Qur'an can have. And subhanAllah, even myself as a young person knew nothing about Islam, but as soon as my father started practicing Islam and reading Qur'an and attached us to the Qur'an, then we started to learn as well. But this is the impact that the Qur'an has, my dear brothers and sisters. So the Qur'an we need to build a relationship with the Qur'an. Yes, we have to have that tadabbur and reflecting on the Qur'an. When we read ayat in the Qur'an, and we read how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at the beginning of Surah Al-Baqarah, He says, Ya ayyuhan nasu u'budu rabbakum alladhi khalaqakum. And O you who, O mankind, worship your Lord. And we go over these ayat without any reflection. And really, as believers, when we read the Quran, we should think, okay, what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has commanded us here. And this ayah, it's the first command we find in the Quran. And then reflect on it. Think about it. Out of all of the commands we find in the Quran, in Surah Al-Baqarah, the first command is what? Is to do ibadah. What's ibadah? What does ibadah actually mean? And Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, for example, he said that ibadah is everything that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves. This is ibadah. We think ibadah is rituals. You pray your salah, you fast Ramadan, you give your zakat, this is ibadah. Ibn Taymiyyah is saying everything that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves. Yes, ta'ah, it's obedience, it's khudu', it's submission, subservience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is all ibadah. When you're good to your neighbor, why? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you know He loves it. This is ibadah. This when you're just in your business dealings, this is ibadah. All of this is ibadah. You have the right intention. Yes, you're worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in these different aspects of your life. Ibadah is a broad term. It covers many things. But you're reflecting on it. Okay, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, worship your Lord. Why is it that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, Rabbukum? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala could have said anything. What's the meaning of Rabb? Yes, if I was to ask you now, what does Rabb mean? Who could tell me the meaning of Rabb? Any ideas? So Rabb is like the master. Rabb is the owner. Rabb is the sustainer. Rabb is the one who nourishes. This is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And what's interesting about Rabb is when you open the Qur'an, yes, if somebody was to open the Qur'an and they read the first ayah from Surah Al-Fatiha, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala after the Basmala, what does He say? Alhamdulillah. All praise is for Allah. Now if you don't know anything, you read that, okay, you're thinking, who's Allah? Rabbul Alameen. The first thing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us is what? Rabbul Alameen. He's the master, the owner, the sustainer of everything in existence. He's your Rabb. The first attribute we're told of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the first name or attribute that we find of Allah is that He is your Rabb. When you think about the first revelation that came down, the Prophet ﷺ is in Ghar Hira. He's reflecting and contemplating. Jibreel ﷺ descends. The first ayat are revealed. Iqra. Read, recite. Bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq. In the name of your Rabb. In the name of your Rabb. And you think, subhanallah, the first revelation, Allah's introducing the Prophet ﷺ to Himself by saying what? Rabb. The one who sustains you. You've gone through a difficult life. You lost your father before you were born. You lost your mother at the age of 6. You lost your grandfather at the age of 8. Yes, you grew up as an orphan. You went through difficulty. Who's the one who sustained you through all of that? Your Rabb. This is the reflection. This is the contemplation, the tadabbur that we need to be doing on the Quran. When we think about these ayat, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't just use words haphazardly. There's a reason for us to reflect on, okay, He's the Rabb. He's the one who took care of me when I was young. He's the one who cultivated me and gave me, nourished me throughout my life. This is my Rabb. So when we look at the Quran and we approach the Quran, is to approach it with from the angle that, what is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saying to me? What is it Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from me? Yes, and many reflections when you go through Surah Al-Baqarah and Surah Ali Imran and you reflect on different ayat. I was sharing, I think it was 2 days ago, with the brothers in Cheadle, during our 4th rak'ah reminder, the ayah where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says again in Surah Al-Baqarah, Ya ayyuhal ladhina amanu dukhulu fi silmi kaffah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He mentions that all you who believe, enter into silm kaffah. Kaffah is like completely. And again, when we read these ayat, what is Allah saying to us? I'm just sharing with you a few examples of how we need to reflect more deeply in the Qur'an. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, O you who believe, enter into silm. What is silm? Yes, silm, according to Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhuma and others, silm is Islam. Allah is saying, enter into Islam completely, entirely, totally. Take this deen as a complete way of life. Let's take this deen as there's no, pick and choose in Islam. There's no, this part of Islam is nice, it's okay, I can do that, but, this part of Islam is too much for me. This part of Islam is asking too much. Okay, I can pray, but when Islam starts to tell me how I can dress, when Islam starts to tell me about how I do business, this is too much. This is the attitude you find in some people, that they want to pick and choose the deen. They have this half-hearted approach to the deen. Allah is saying, no, enter into Islam entirely. You take everything from Islam. Everything Islam comes with, you accept, you take, you live by. You don't pick and choose like we have today. As I said, you've come across many Muslims that they want an Islam that's applicable to their way of life. They want to build an Islam needs to fit in with me. Not that I need to submit myself to Islam, because Islam is what? When we say Islam, what is Islam? Islam is submission. That's Islam, that you submit yourself to Allah. The Muslim is the one who submits, the one who does the Islam. The Muslim, Islam, he's the one who huwa alladhi yuslim, he's the one who submits. Submits what? Submits his desires, his ego, his whims, his thoughts. What? He submits all of that to Allah. That I'm going to live by the Sharia. I'm going to live by Allah's code of life, Allah's way of life. I'm not going to decide what I can and can't do. No, Allah's decided what's allowed and what's not allowed. Allah's decided the limits and the boundaries. And so I'm going to live by that. I'm going to submit to that. That's Islam. Yes, Islam isn't, like I said, where you will take some of it and leave the rest. No, this is this is one of the tricks of shaitan. And this is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the ayah, He goes on, وَلَا تَتَّبِعُ خُطُوَاتِ الشَّيْطَانِ. Don't follow the footsteps of shaitan. Don't follow the footsteps of shaitan. Why? Because what will shaitan do? Shaitan will come to you and say, take it easy. Don't be so strict on yourself. Islam is, don't worry, you can engage in riba, you can engage in interest. Don't worry, you can speak to this girl online. What's the big deal? There's no harm in these things. And this is what Islam. So this is from the tricks of shaitan. From the tricks of shaitan, and many of the scholars, they discuss about the different tactics that are used by shaitan. Number one, you have to understand, when you have this approach of picking and choosing to obey Allah, this is from the footsteps of shaitan. Because shaitan is the description of Iblis. Iblis is the name, shaitan is the description. Who was it that picked and chose when to obey Allah? It was Iblis. Iblis was a worshipper. Iblis recognized Allah, worshipped Allah. But when the command came to prostrate to Adam, what did Iblis do? He refused. Yes, he picked and chose, which of Allah's commands am I going to obey? Which ones can I stay away from? This one he didn't want to obey. So similarly, when we don't obey the commands of Allah and pick and choose which command we're going to obey, we're following in those footsteps of shaitan. That's exactly what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us not to do. Follow in the footsteps of shaitan. And as I said, shaitan will come and try to justify many things to you. Yeah, for example, you hear a rumor. Okay, you want to go and now discuss that with your close friend. Have you heard what happened to so-and-so? Deep down, you shouldn't do it. Shaitan comes to you and says, it's harmless talk. Everybody's talking about it. It's no issue. It's not hidden. Yeah, deep down, this is gossip. This is something that Allah does not permit. But shaitan will come and try to justify it to you. Shaitan, for different people, will have different strategies. And then sometimes shaitan will come to you and convince you that, look, you're a good person. You pray 5 times a day. Yes, you know who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is. You're you're a good person. This is your Islam. Now how the way you live the rest of your life is okay. It's up to you. You don't have to worry about following every single rule in Islam. It's another trick of shaitan. So shaitan will also will come to some people and say, when you commit certain sins, that don't worry, it's a minor sin. Yes, you hear this. It's not from the major sins, it's a minor sin. As long as you don't do the major sin, and you do some good actions, they will clear the minor sin. Don't worry about it. This is from the tricks of shaitan. It'll get you used to the minor sins, and then it leads on to the major sins. Yes, and this idea of minor and major, as one of the Salaf said, لا تنظر إلى حجم المعصية ولكن انظر إلى عظم من أسيت. Never have this attitude about minor and major. He said, don't look at the size of the sin. Look at the greatness of the one who you've disobeyed. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you breathe His air, you live on His land, He's given you everything. Yet you walk around and openly disobey Him. Don't think of it as minor. This is why one of the Salaf, they said that perhaps you commit a minor sin which is amplified in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It might be a minor sin, but because of your attitude, it's major now with Allah. Because you don't think anything of it and just disregard it and don't do tawbah for it, it could be major with Allah. And how many commit major sins, but it's nothing with Allah? Why? Because they did tawbah. Why? Because they had regret. Why? Because they had remorse. So this is attitude that we need to develop, my dear brothers and sisters. So, these are just some thoughts in terms of how do we practically then build this relationship with the Qur'an. And just to finish off, our ulama, they advise that everybody should have a daily wird of the Qur'an, meaning a daily portion of what you read from the Qur'an. Every single day there's a set amount that you read and you recite. And alongside that, you should have a daily portion of your understanding of what you're reading. It could just be 10 minutes a day, for example. I'm going to open the Qur'an and I'm going to read the translation and I'm going to try to understand what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying to me on a daily basis, especially in this month of Ramadan. This is the month where you can connect with the Qur'an like no other month. Yes, it's in this month where you start to build that relationship, you start to build those habits. So on a regular basis you are trying to understand. And now there are many lectures online, tafsir lectures of different surahs, of different series, and many of them are out there. You can go and search. There's a very detailed one that's been delivered by Sheikh Ahsan Hanif. Sheikh Ahsan Hanif from Green Lane Masjid in Birmingham. For the last few years he's been doing Tafsir Sa'adi, in which he goes to great detail to explain the Qur'an. And there's others who have done like a summary of the juz, one juz each day, 30 episodes, where you can actually listen to that and get an overview of the theme of each juz. So for those who maybe struggle with reading, listening is another option. But building some type of plan. Yes, you have to have a plan. A person who doesn't have a plan is not going to go anywhere. I'm telling you now. You've all maybe can relate to this to some extent. If you don't have a plan or a schedule, then it's very difficult to achieve anything. Yes, because what's required is discipline. And a part of discipline is to have a structure. Yes, if you don't have a structure, you don't have a jadwal that you're going to live by or go by, very quickly shaitan comes to you, gets you busy with something else, distracts you with this, distracts you with that, and you're all over the place, not going anywhere, not achieving anything. So have your own schedule. I did this with some students before Ramadan. I said, what's your day going to look like in Ramadan? Monday to Friday, okay, what's it going to look like? Saturday, Sunday, what's it going to look like? Meaning, what time are you going to wake up? Yes, what are you going to do after your suhoor? Are you going to pray qiyam before suhoor? Yes, it's a time of blessing. Do some qiyam before suhoor. You have your suhoor. After suhoor, you're going to go to the masjid. Okay, after the masjid, what are you going to do? Do you need rest at that time? Are you going to come back and go to sleep? Are you going to do your daily recitation of the Qur'an at that time? Okay, during the day you're at work or you're at university. When you come back, you're going to have this much time between when you return to iftar. What are you going to do? Are you going to rest in that time? Or is that the time that you maybe want to make your du'as or do your recitation? Everybody's different in terms of their schedule, in terms of their timings. Okay, now you've had your iftar, you're going to go to the masjid. What time are you going to stay in the masjid to? Okay, when you get back, what's your plan for when you get back? And we should have some type of structure to our day. You should have some plan of how I'm going to spend my day. Not just you wake up in the morning and, oh, khalas, and what's going on today, and we'll just go to the masjid and see where we end up. No. The believer has a structure. So build that structure, write that plan of how you're going to spend your day, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. And when you do this, honestly, you will see that the barakah will come. You will see barakah in your time, you will see barakah in your life, you will see barakah in what you're studying. Why? Because you have a structure. Yes, why? Because you have a schedule you're sticking to. And you will see over 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 days your progress. You will see how you're building on this every single day. After 10 days, after 20 days, after 30 days, where you end up. Why? Because, as I said, you're following this schedule, you're following this plan that you've put in place. And for everybody it's different. Everybody has their own family commitments, everybody has their own work schedule, everybody has their own commitments that they have to stick to. So it's upon you to build your own schedule. Yes? And like I said, take some time out to do this. Why? Because very quickly you realize, what are we, today's Sunday. We started Ramadan last Monday. Allahu Akbar, before you know it, the first 10 days have gone. And then you're into the middle 10. Honestly, before you know, you'll be sitting here, somebody else will be giving a lecture in a few weeks' time, and you think, where has Ramadan gone? The whole of Ramadan just disappeared, and like the blink of an eye. And what did I achieve from this Ramadan? What did I get out of this Ramadan? Have I progressed in this Ramadan? So before you get to that point where the end of the month comes and you look back and you think, I didn't do anything, put the plan in place now. You still have time. There's still 23 days? 23 or however many days are left. Are still there for us to really strive and put things in place, inshallah. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He gives us tawfiq. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He blesses the month of Ramadan for us all. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He makes this a month of transformation. He makes this a month of coming closer to His book, to His kalam, and He makes us from those who live by the Qur'an. Yes, not only that we love it, we live by it. And this is the key message of the Qur'an, is that it's a book that we live by, inshallah. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Barakallahu feekum.